Welcome everyone to today's webinar and thank you for joining us. My name is Yasmin. I'm a consultant at Core Recruitment and we're hosting this session to celebrate Lesbian Visibility Week, recognising visibility is not just acceptance but a driver of leadership, influence and progress. I'm also very pleased to introduce Femi Otitoju, who will be chairing today's event. Femi is the founder of Challenge Consultancy, a leading equality, diversity and inclusion training organisation, and has been an LGBTQ+ activist for over 40 years. She started her work supporting the community through Switchboard and has since held leadership roles across organisations including London Lesbian and Gay Centre and Queerwell. Femi has also worked with a wide range of major businesses, public bodies, charities, helping them build more inclusive cultures and create meaningful, lasting change. So very warm welcome to you, Femi.
Yasmin, thank you. It's nice to be introduced in a lovely corporate way.
Yeah.
Although I get into lots of corporate organisations, I don't usually behave in quite the way they expect. I'm very pleased to be here with you today and very pleased to have an amazing panel. I'll just say a few words about what we're going to do. Then I'm going to introduce our lovely panellists and then we'll get into it. So this session, it's going to run short of an hour, something like that. And what we're going to do is dive into the theme of visibility as a sign of power and prosperity and looking at the good side of being a lesbian and being visible. So we'll look at career progression and leadership and opportunities, how they rise, how you influence people, and maybe we'll talk a bit about prosperity as well. We'll certainly touch on things like responsibility and cultural impact. And as always, when you do these panels, you look a little bit forward, don't you, at the end of the panel? So we'll look at the future and legacy of lesbian visibility. So that's what we're going to do. And let me tell you a little bit about the people who are actually going to do it. I'm going to have to say both names because we have some duplicates here today. So let me start first of all with Candice. Candice is the culinary director at Bennett Hay and brings a perspective from the hospitality industry where she leads on that issue. Alongside her day job, her professional leadership role, she's a visible advocate for inclusion, and she uses her platform to champion LGBTQ+ representation. I'm hoping that Candice will feel able to speak to us about the real impact of visibility on career growth and leadership and creating spaces where people can succeed without compromise. And then, so hello and welcome, Candice. And then I'd like to introduce Anna Brent. And Anna is head of creative operations, and she brings sort of a creative and cultural lens to our panel here today. With a career spanning things like brand, storytelling, operational leadership, as well as doing things like being a consistent advocate for visibility and representation for our communities. Anna uses creativity as a way of shaping culture and opening up opportunity. So today I'm hoping Anna will offer some insight into how visibility influences perception and leadership for the next generation of talent. And next, so welcome, Anna. And next, I'd like to introduce Kelly Canterford, who is the founder of Tigru. Tell me I've said it right. Tigru Consulting.
Yeah, Tigru Consulting.
Thank you. And Kelly is a diversity and inclusion specialist, so we've got that in common. Also an executive coach and founder of her own business. Her career spans media, hospitality and real estate. She's co-founded Building Pride and now working globally is helping organisations to create inclusive cultures. She's also co-chair of Freehold LGBT, which is a community interest company, and she continues to champion visibility, belonging and systemic change. Welcome, Kelly. And our last panellist, but not least, of course, is what we have to say, our second Anna, Anna Mendes, Deputy General Manager at CSCs in Pall Mall. Anna's a hospitality leader with years of experience, 12 years experience across catering and events, specialising in operations and guest experience and team leadership. She also leads Bespire, It's an inclusion network focusing on LGBTQIA plus communities, and she leads on that across multiple brands. So Anna's bringing us practical, people-focused perspectives on how visibility translates into culture, connection, and environments where what we all want, where people can thrive, truly thrive. So welcome to all our panelists. I've got a few sets of questions already prepared to talk to you about, but if you would like to bring other issues in, of course, in fact, I'm actually hoping that you will do that, and we will have quite a nice conversation between us all today. So let me start with the first kind of set of questions that I want to look at, which is about visibility as power and career leadership and impact, that sort of thing. And if I can start with you, Kelly, maybe others will come in later, but when did you realise that being visible is more than a personal thing, but that it can also be powerful?
I think when you talk about visibility, first of all, you need to look at invisibility. And when I started in industry, when I graduated, went into the workplace, like many people, I'd been out, went into the closet when I went into work. 18 months later, months of judging my pronouns, practicing trying to keep everything neutral, which I'm sure we've all done and people are very familiar with. I burnt out and I had to leave the workplace for 18 months. So I rejoined in 2003 with the idea that I was never going to hide part of my identity again. And that started out as being out with my team, then being out in the business, and then being out corporately or on an industry scale. And the first time it really meant, or it had two meanings. One, it was a lot lighter for me. I could just go about, and funny enough, I could do my job rather than worrying about everything else that was happening. So it made me much more effective at my job. But the moment when I started building pride at JLL, I'd been in the industry 8 years before I knew there was any other gay people around. Freeholder started, met other people. And there's a graduate, two particular points. A graduate came up to me and said, "Oh, I didn't think I was going to be allowed to be me in this industry. But seeing you being out and being okay, it gave me the confidence to be myself at work." And I was like, and it's one of those things I didn't appreciate what being an out visible lesbian meant to other people, because there comes a point when you just take it for granted. This is me, I'm doing it. You get to a certain age and you think, I can't be asked with hiding who I am anymore. I just want to get on with the job. And the other one was a person who was walking around the office, always looking like they'd got a really clenched jaw. People would comment about how unapproachable they were. In time, they came to speak to us and they were questioning their sexuality, and being a role model, being out, being visible, allowed them to come out to themselves, come out to their family, and then come out in the workplace. And when I see this person skipping across the floor a few months later, I realised it's not about me. It really isn't about me. It's the impact that we have by just turning up and showing up that has on other people. So I think that's when I realised that it wasn't just personal to me, but it was powerful to the people around me and the message that we can send.
Yeah, it's lovely when you can pinpoint that moment, both for yourself and for others. I wonder if anybody else has got a story about how, for them, something happened that shifted your sense of self and made it possible for you to come out.
I've been with my partner my wife for 23 years, I think. And she wasn't out at work, and nor to her dad, and so we'd done a lot of conversations about it. But she just had stopped kind of conversing with her colleagues and trying to have a conversation on a Monday about weekends, or even just bringing up anything personal at work. And I'm just like, who are you chatting to now? La la la. And not really. Don't want to do this. Don't want to say anything because they're going to ask. And it's like, well, okay. So we kind of set an ultimatum. She went to leave one of her workplace, and I said to her, okay, so now's the time, for you to start as you mean to go on. and we were going through the adoption process. And she was like, "Well, hey, if I'm not proud of myself, how can I expect my son to, look up to me and be proud of me as well?" And I was like, "Well, it's a really valid point. So let's workshop that one." So, her new role, she came out at her interview. In actual fact, they said, "Oh, you're married," just general chit chat before the meeting started. And she came out at that point, and her boss said, "Oh, so am I." And so it just worked out perfectly. But the difference in her is like night and day. Kelly, you're very right. Is just, and it's not even her just being able to have a conversation at work. It's just not walking into work with the fear that someone's going to ask a question that genderfies a partner. And just maybe being able to go out for dinner with her friends and saying, "I'm going to meet my other half after dinner. Would you like to go for a drink?" And not be afraid to say, "Oh, this is my friend. We're just out having a catch up." It's really important. So I saw it firsthand.
Yeah, lovely. And do you think that when people are more visible, that creates some element of credibility around them? Do you think it enhances that in any way?
I think I wrote a little LinkedIn recently about the passing of my parents, because I realised it was having a similar impact on me, not being honest about how they passed, etc. So there was a double suicide, really awful circumstances, la la la. But I was walking around with that as a hidden thing. So I posted and said, "Look, many people know that I'm gay. They know I've got an adoptive son. What they don't know is X, Y, and Z." And it's great to talk about it, because if someone else is going through a similar experience, I just think the more we share in our working environment, the more authentic it makes us, because we're human.
Yeah.
And there's going to be little breadcrumbs along the way that you might leave that someone else will decide to pick up. They may not, but it might just be that perfect moment in time of a sliding door where someone decides to pick it up, and it saves them in a way.
Yeah. Thank you. So it affects people around us. It can make them feel that they can perhaps come out and be more open themselves. Do you think, let me go to Anna Brown. Anna, do you think that being openly lesbian has changed the way people experience you as a leader, rather than say it's just a colleague?
Yes, I think that there's a privilege that comes with being othered in your life experience. And I think that some people feel bad about that, and some people turn it into a positive. And I think where I approach it on a professional level is to feel very proud of it, very explicit and very consistent about it. And I have experienced quite tangible things with people that I have line managed or that I've worked closely with, where when I started a professional relationship with them, the gender referrals to their partners were neutral. And over time, that changed, and you sort of really experience that journey and the difference of that person being obviously able to be open with you in a way that they perhaps haven't somewhere else in a work environment. And I think it's really interesting for my line of work, because I manage creatives, and I think there's an ask of creatives to do their best work by feeling very psychologically safe. And I think to be a good creative, you have to be in an environment where you are genuinely comfortable to shoot your shot, propose things, not worry about how it lands. And a lot of that comes with how you bring yourself to work, right? Bringing your whole self to work, your ideas as much as your influences and background. And so I think your intersectional makeup as a human, as a creative, is really influential. And so I love to work with teams where you can really feel that they're unicorns and they're different, and each one is unique to the other. So the idea of celebrating diversity or difference in identity is real and really tangible, and we want that. So the idea that anyone is not able to express that or not comfortable bringing that, I genuinely think is a hindrance to the working environment. And the other thing is that I don't want to be too generalist about it, right? Some people choose not to bring their whole selves to work because that's a choice. But what I want to make sure is that it's not through lack of choice. If somebody wants to, then they can. And so my visibility, anything I can do that sort of feels like me using my sphere of influence in a positive way, is, I think, really impactful and important. And I've quite consciously tried to build on that and use that as much as possible. And I've had lots of interesting experiences along the way. Like I had a guy that I worked with closely in my old agency. He said, "When you started, I hated you. And I was like, oh my God, what did I do? Did I say something rude? Did I offend you? And he said, I hated you because you were out straight away and it took me a year. And I sort of felt for him because we were in the same environment. So we actually experienced the same people and the same values, but something had held him back from doing it for a really long time. And he felt kind of like sort of sick and annoyed that I had come in and just been quite out. But
did he come out because you did? Or was he already out when you got there?
He was recently out when I got there. But it had been a case of him taking a long time over it and just feeling safe and all those personal things that affect that, right? When it happened for you. But I thought it was a really interesting reflection that we came into the same place, but came in with a different view of how we were going to do it or when we were going to do it. So unfortunately for him, it was a difficult year before he was comfortable enough to do so.
Yeah, probably a bit of envy in there as well, I'm sure. Yeah. Thank you for that. So people around us gain when we're out. Anna Mendes, can I just ask you, is there any way in which you personally have gained because you were out, not just helped other people, but has it brought opportunities into your life?
100%. I think I've always made a very conscious effort of being out and being able to, come to the workplace as my own individual, my own identity. But of course, in a world where you are young and you want to progress in your professional life, I might have toned that at some point. And I think there was a moment where I've also had that click where I'm no longer going to tone it down and I'm going to be who I am. And it was essentially actually by challenging one of my senior peers in the senior leadership team that the whole conversation started coming up about challenging that status quo where maybe an older generation of leaders maybe has a bit of a stuck up ways or has a bit of a stereotyped identity, and by challenging that has really allowed me to then create this profile within CSCs, but also now a bit more outside of CSCs with different brands where it has created the opportunity for me to lead Bispire, which is something that I'm really proud of, as I've touched in terms of being able to create a sense of inclusiveness for people across the brands, but we go a little bit further and we try to involve people, friends and family. Anyone is welcome. But that is certainly started transpiring being, part of a conversation, with a senior team and people coming and ask me questions. What do you think, Hannah? How can this impact? You have all these ideas. How can we make CSC's culture more inclusive, more powerful? And I think this has been brilliant. It's just a journey that I've recently started on. Bispire is not even 2 years old. And we are very much trying, I think, still living off from the initial excitement of what something that's coming up. But it's really exciting, and I think for me, it's really become a conversation starter of, okay, this is Anna, the operations leader, but now she's also this person that is out. Yeah. And people come to me and ask me questions and say they'll mention that they really are inspired by the drive and the passion that I put behind it, and that is, I think, kind of like linked into the rest of the people around us, and that's why we're growing, and I think I'm able to continue to touch more people and help anyone that really wants that help, I suppose. Yeah,
that's great. And I love the fact that the being out then brings you in touch with even more senior people, because that gives you an even greater chance to enhance your own progress potentially, as well as affect what's going on in the organisation.
Effectively, be able to create that impact for the rest of the people, right, to others, because that is an example that is set for future peers, I suppose.
Yeah, great stuff. Has anyone else got a benefit from being out, like actually literally themselves, career progression or something like that?
Can I just add into that point, Anna, where you're saying about the access to senior people? I joined Freehold as a fairly newly qualified surveyor, and I went into the room, and it's such a unique networking experience, because so often you go into a space and you're a graduate, you can't speak to this person, you've got to speak to this person, C-suite's off limits. And I remember going into the room and chatting with Brian Bickle, the CEO of Shaftesbury. There's sort of all of these senior leaders, but we were on such a level playing field that we were there networking. And it's an opportunity that I was given through joining Freehold being part of the LGBT community in real estate. So I think there are occasions when it does give you those sort of opens doors to people because of a connection, and not having to, or nobody knows what it's like to walk into a room and think, okay, which part of me am I bringing into the room tonight?
Yeah.
And when you can just bring it all in, it's like you breathe out and enjoy the evening.
I love the idea that being out gives you new connections, and that might even result in career progression. Or does it? Candice, can we talk money? Do you think that being out has affected your earning power, your career progression, that kind of thing?
Well, I think it's a bit of a combination, to be honest with you. So I can only speak from my personal perspective, but, obviously I'm Australian, very egalitarian. I treat the C-suite. I mean, I'm part of the leadership team in Better and Hay, so we're kind of the changes of the industry. And coming through the ranks, obviously, I think, my graft, I think, not even just being gay, but I think my graft had to sit me in good stead with the guys in the kitchen. What I think has given me the opportunity to help others on that journey. I don't think it's necessarily helped me, because it's a very difficult industry, but me being in the role I'm in is helping others. I think it's purely because if I get a CV that's coming through with a female's name on it, and I have a conversation or look at a picture online, as we do, we have a little bit of a stalk on Instagram of their food, etc., as chefs. Then we might just say, if you see, a young woman and, she might be trans, or she could be, a woman that identifies as non-binary, there isn't an instant judgment to put her in a role. And there could be if in this world, because, often we still see CVs that are rejected if there's an interesting name of another cultural heritage. And, all of a sudden it's like, well, actually we just want John Doe, and we don't want Sally Anderson. We just want John Doe. So I think the opportunity that I've got right now is to make those huge changes to an industry that is very predominantly white male.
Yeah.
I
Lovely.
feel very, very lucky.
I do too. It's a real privilege, isn't it, to be able to do that? And so what you're doing is kind of offsetting the unconscious bias that other people are just using to make their decisions, and that hopefully will recalibrate some of the ways in which they think as well when they see those different people. Let's go back to Kelly, because Kelly was talking about being involved in helping organisations do have better practice. Do you think? Tell me about organisations that you think are leading the way with their employee resource groups. Does workplace visibility really help professionals in that way?
Yes, in a nutshell. I would say when you look at women in the workplace, we're a minority of a minority. If you look at women, they're a minority. You look at gay women, lesbians, queer women, we're a minority of a minority. And it's going back into that, when I go into the room, which part of me am I going to be battling with or showing? Or sometimes it's just hard enough being a woman in the workplace. So we'll go through that. Going into the ERGs and what's working, I think that's where there's some real key developments within businesses. Having those internal networks where you've got a point of contact. If it's even better if an organisation has got a D&I lead, because it takes the pressure off of those ERG leaders. And this is one of my bugbears, and I experienced it when I was the lead of a network. People would come to you and expect you to answer questions, and you think, well, if it's about policy, I think that there are other people that are much more qualified. I'm focused on doing the job that you pay me for, not my gay job. My gay job is on top of this. It's added value if you want it as part of yours. So I think the networks offer a space where people can connect, which is so important, particularly in larger, well, you've got two things. In a large organisation, when you're across perhaps many sites or just in a big building, getting together with a network where you can have, you can meet colleagues with a shared interest without having to wear those masks, nice and easy. And then the other side of that, you've got the smaller organisations, but the ERGs are much more of an umbrella organisation within where they support people, neurodiversity, disability, race, carers, parents, and the LGBT networks, and you can really feed into that intersectionality and support people there. And I think having the visibility within the ERGs is important. One thing I will say, and it kind of comes back to that point you were making, Anna, about your colleague who wasn't out. And it's really interesting because I think so often there's a gay male privilege that it's acceptable, or it's kind of like the good gay face. People, and I remember this from my first job, which is one of the reasons I was in the closet, is people thought it was great when you had the gay best friend, but lesbians in film, and this may resonate for some of you, probably not old enough, but the lesbians or gay women, serial killers, always return to the man. There's always this negative image.
Or dead.
Or dead, yeah. Never a happy ending. And you can just go through. It was one of the things I studied at university, and you walk out of the lecture and you're like, wow, life's going to be great, isn't it? But with that, it was easier for me not to be out because everybody was okay with the gay guy in the group, but a lesbian, oh well, she's a predator. So I think it's now kind of flipping it on its head, that we've got a much more equal playing field, and trying to connecting those up. Sorry, I feel like I've lost my thought with my diversion off onto serial killers and
it's deeply entertaining.
Well, no, I was going to stop.
Okay, thank you for that. But it is true that we do need to think about how we are seen and see if we can make sure that's holistic. And I'd just like to come back to one point you made early on, which is I have a day job and the gay job is extra. And what I'm doing with a lot of my clients is saying, if you have given somebody a gay job, you need to ask what you as a business are doing for them. The simplest thing would be to say, just give them a pay rise, they're doing extra, but they're working above their pay grade. I don't find many clients accept that, but I find many of them will put on a development program for them to learn new skills, report writing skills, or presentation skills and things like that. So, I
had a wonderful experience of that. In my day job, they were in my gay job I was up for awards and I was being recognised as one of the top contributors within the organisation. In my day job, they're like, if you do this again, you're going to be on report and we're going to be reviewing your position within the company. But who am I playing for here? I'm sure we're all on the same team, and it's working out the value that you're bringing to the organisation. The fact that I could get into some of the clients and say, hey, we're doing this, do you want to collaborate with us? Can we do this together? And bringing that client base in, because it wasn't directly impacting my team, they didn't see it. And I think
I thought that was going to be good news. I thought that was going to be an example of them being terribly pleased with you.
Well, some people were.
Good. Well, that's something. Has anybody, let's start with Anna Mendes and then anybody else who wants to come in. Have you ever turned down an opportunity that meant that you couldn't come out, required you to be invisible? And did you learn anything from it? So let's start with Anna Mendes, but anybody else who wants to come in can come in after.
I haven't necessarily turned down an opportunity. I have certainly questioned, should I move forward or not with a certain role, and particularly the role that I hold now at 116. I think before accepting it, I was very conscious that it was an old white male members club in Pall Mall, and I wasn't quite sure if that was what was going to fit within my profile and the things I wanted to achieve. But instead of rejecting that opportunity, I decided to embrace it and really use it to create more impact and change, right? So rather than kind of not take that path, I thought, okay, I will go and I will aim to bring that visibility and equality into 116. And I think so far we've been able to do a lot of work. And one of the things that we've seen at 116, you have loads of old royals and a lot of men in majority of the paintings around the building. So I walk very proudly every day around the corridors, knowing that I stand today here and I lead a massive team of people that are essentially living the values that I am trying to put in that culture. And one of the things that we found and we have done was holding its ever Pride brunch, pre-Pride last year, and there was a sense of a lot of proudness, having the gay flags across the building and saying, here there's loads of people that are walking in through those doors that are feeling seen and visible and respected in a place that maybe in the past it wasn't, right? So certainly I think it's using those opportunities, and that's what I've done, is to let's go in and let's try to change it and change it from the inside.
Fantastic. I love the way that even remembering it is making you smile again. It's got to be good for us, right? To be wandering around knowing that we're doing that. So creating change, an opportunity for others. Annabeth, have you had a chance to do that, to use your visibility well, we had the thing about being out, which makes a huge difference, but anything practical as well that you've had a chance to do?
I've certainly been involved. I'm kind of a yes person just by nature, based on, I think, this part of my personality, based on this part of my identity. I'm very much like grab the opportunity if it comes. And I wouldn't say I'm naturally somebody who would love getting on stage and speaking and being center of attention. But honestly, if it's related to Pride or Lesbian Visibility Week, I am definitely yes, yes, yes. So I think there's something about understanding that there's no growth without comfort. There's no growth in comfort, rather. And if you just do the thing that you sort of naturally feel is easy, unchallenging, not confronting, then actually you're not going to change anything. So if I put myself in that scenario, I hope that rubs off in the ripples of feelings around me. And sometimes I've had to make that choice with clients, for example. I guess I present as a heteronormative woman. Like, people assume I'm straight most of the time, and I wear a wedding ring. And if I refer to children, often the question is, "What does your husband do?" And so, in my life, out of choice, I would always say, "My wife is a blah blah." But sometimes when it's just a client and you think, oh God, what is the value in me doing that? And it's a choice all the time to do it. And I would say 9 out of 10 times I do respond with "my wife is X." To counteract that. But I think it's interesting that we even have that experience of that choice all the time. And there is a bit of an exhaustion around it. So I think the commitment to it is like an extra load that I think we all of minority status carry. And so that is something where you have to choose to either be fully in or not. And the other time that's happened to me is with international clients from cultures where the perception of a gay person is absolutely not the same as here. And I've been really aware of it with clients, for example, in certain places like Middle East, certain parts of Asia, where I know that they might be challenged by how out I am. I've had to think, do I temper something down? Do I restrict how much I say? But it's that plaster off mentality now that I live by, because it's out there. I'm publishing things. I'm talking about it on LinkedIn. So unless I was fully deciding to be in the closet, unfortunately for them, that's something that they have to deal with professionally. Yeah.
That cat's firmly out of the bag, isn't it? Definitely.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you see it as a sort of a responsibility. Let me ask Candice, do you feel the same sort of thing, that there is there any responsibility that comes with being a visible lesbian in a position of
100%. I mean, I think I just think that how would we expect the next generation to make those changes if we weren't doing it ourselves on a daily basis? Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of people that, in my working environment feel so much safer because I am out and I'm very honest and open about my family. And, I work quite a lot, as you can tell, with chefs, and I know you would know that, in hospitality as well. We work a lot, and sometimes, that might be missing out on, an experience with my son in the morning. So, I'm on a video call and he says, "Who's there today?" And I'm like, "Well, Chef Nick's here, and, Abigail's over there," and he'll have a quick chat with them. And then, there'll be someone that might walk into the kitchen and say, "Oh, is that your wife in the background?" And, that then might start a conversation. So I've had a young individual starting, and she's come out to me. And I thought to myself, if I hadn't have said anything, or if I'm not open and I'm not being responsible and I'm not being authentic, how are people going to have those experiences themselves?
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And I was actually going to go from there to, what do you want younger lesbians to understand about visibility and success? Not to put you all too much on the spot, Anna, if you want, Anna Brent, if you want to do it, but anybody else wants to come in. Let's see if we can all do this. What do you want younger lesbians to understand about visibility and success? You start us off, Anna Brent, if you're up for it, and then everybody else.
Yeah, I think I would just want them to feel very secure that there's a big world with lots of variety. There's not one type of woman and there's not one type of lesbian. And I hope that they would feel empowered to just really own who they are in whatever description, identity, or intersectionality they have. And I hope that if they're challenged by it, they're in an environment that isn't right, isn't supportive, or is difficult, that they would know that there's plenty of people or plenty of examples of people that will help. I think, I hope what we're doing here is being visible, putting our names online, being approachable, right? If there is a young woman or a lesbian or somebody who identifies as any of those things and is worried at work, then I do think that there is clearly light, there's clearly access to people, and the idea that you would be suffering in silence, I hope, is over.
Lovely. Has anyone got anything to add to that? Let's go on to Anna Mendes then. Some of the ways in which people express their identity is through not just the words and their action, but through comedy, art, poetry, those sorts of things. Do you think that's useful? I mean, we've heard Kelly talk about dead lesbians, serial killers. Sorry, I had to go back to it. But do you think there is a way that that these creative expressions can help amplify lesbian visibility and influence culture?
I think absolutely, and if not only by the way of my own experiences as a teenager, running, trying to come out in a world that was not so gentle and so nice. The reality was that watching lesbians on TV was making it's okay. There is somewhere out there in the world that they do exist. It's not just something in your mind. And I think storytelling and it creates realities, right? It creates and it helps bypass this resistance that people build up in society by unconscious bias or real bias. So I think there is certainly a direct link between storytelling, comedy, art, etc., to what it exists nowadays in our lives. And we take example from what we watch on TV. We are severely influenced by what we hear, what we read, and what we see. And therefore, I think it's so important that there is representation. And for me, it will certainly help me a lot to accept who I was, and knowing that there was an opportunity for me somewhere in the world to do so. And I think it is definitely a precursor to it. And I think that it needs to continue to happen. I think we are seeing nowadays a lot more. I think the representation is going away from the serial killer, the one that always dies, and we are having a lot more representation in this mainstream media. 2025 was the year of the lesbian recoming, reckoning, etc. Chapel Row, and etc. And I think it's allowing all these young individuals that we were just touching base, that there is a representation and it's okay, and and I think it's making it all a lot more normalized.
Yeah, it's great. So let's see, how can we make visibility more rewarding for the ones who are seeing all this positive representation, are coming out? How do we make sure that they gain and feel safe in their visibility? Kelly, you've done a lot of work in sort of what organisations do. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just to add, Anna. So we had in the UK, you had Corrie, where you had your first lesbian couple marry the other day, and who can forget? Was it Hayley and Roy Cropper? The trans woman representation, yeah, which was incredible within the media, and how we can be so progressive with it. But yeah, so making it safe and making people feel okay comes back to allyship. I'll hand on heart, I think the safe space for people, having that respect, and it comes from allyship within our community and outside. With Freehold, we did an event a couple of years ago around allyship, and inadvertently we called out all the guys in the room. It wasn't intended, but we said at the end of the question at the end of the session was to one of the gay men on the panel, how are you going to be a better ally? And it meant we were just talking in general. We went, oh gosh, no, I realise I look at me and I don't look beyond. And I think that could be said of all of us. I'm not saying it's just gay men. I think sometimes we can look at a situation and go, oh, I'm okay. And to a certain degree, it's one of the reasons we're experiencing some of the kickbacks that we have at the moment, because a lot of people have gone, I'm okay, I don't need to do anything, my world hasn't been impacted. And then we see those rights starting to be not chipped away at, and they start to well, we then go backwards a little bit at a time. But this is more about being that safe space. And so I really think within the workplace, we move away from the kind of heteronormative language that people use. Going back to that minority of minority, not only do we experience sexism, but we can experience homophobia in the workplace. So it's bringing that awareness into the environment that we're working in, so that people are more conscious about language, are more conscious about how they respond. And I think there's work I'm doing with an organisation at the moment, and saying to them, you do realise that the behaviour that is set by your lowest denominator is the acceptable behaviour for your business. So if you let one person get away with it, there's going to be another person that thinks they can get away with it. And I think that is the real key.
It speaks to the culture, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's all about the culture. And I think everything that we do, whether it be individually with ERGs, getting awards are fantastic and recognise the work that's being done. But if you have a couple of people leaving that business because of the award, their experience, then that shows that the culture isn't embedded across everywhere. It's in pools. And I think that's something that we can probably all look at within our different sectors and say, okay, you've got people that work in sort of the professional service, the customers facing service. One part will be doing better than the other. We need to make sure that we've got a much more joined up way of addressing and supporting people, so that the visibility is there, the support and the speaking out behaviours. It comes back to psychological safety, the culture. It's trust, it's belonging. There's so many things within this that will help make it being out, being visible easier. And it's also asking people the questions so you can make it relatable. Because while it's in the abstract, it's just another thing. But if you can make it relatable and get somebody to remember what it's like to feel excluded, that's where you start to create the change. It's all about the feeling.
You've got some good things there: allyship, language, some awareness, and awards, and lots that people can do to try and create more inclusive environments for those that are bold enough to come out and be visible. I'm going to ask you to think about, actually, let me just ask one more question of Candice, if I may. Where do you see, this might be a strange terminology, the next wave of lesbian power emerging from? So we talked about the arts, we've talked about ERGs and how we're out at work. Do you think there's somewhere else that we're going to start seeing lesbian visibility having an impact?
That's an interesting question, because it's funny now, you don't really see many gay clubs anymore. I mean, I met my wife at the candy bar. So Candy met Candy at the candy bar. Candy met Jules at the candy bar. It's hilarious, isn't it? And I know they went out and we just happened to come across each other. But it's hilarious. It's a great line. But those bars are few and far between now. You don't really get that kind of the gay night out. So I think people now, there's an expectation that you just need to be gay in your space. And because we're kind of, the generation, I'm kind of clocking into, the mid-class of the generational bracket now, heaven forbid. And, I think, we're the ones that are kind of, back in the day may have, I kind of mixed with everyone, but there might have been more kind of defined kind of categories of the people you mixed with back in the day. Maybe the gay stayed with the gay guys stayed over there, and the lesbians were over there, and, you know, straights were over there, and the people that wanted to party were over there. And now it's much more about, because they're not kind of segmented, it's much more amalgamated. So they have to be gay within the space that they're in, or be themselves within the space they're in. So I think, you know, there's a greater ownership, there's greater visibility, and there's greater infrastructure of that. So I think it's moving more kind of into sport now, you know, the growing rate of women in sport, and, you know, just the popularity of women's sport. I mean, I've never taken my son to a guy's game. He's been to the majority of the Arsenal women's games. And I just think it's fantastic, you know, and often they're actually far more exciting and more creative than the guys' games anyway, probably better to watch anyway. So, and then tech and entrepreneurship. I think, you know, women now, you know, lesbians don't they're more out and more able to be themselves. So I guess bringing your whole self to work, as we've spoken about this whole session, creates that ability to be yourself. And to be yourself, you have to bring your creative energies. You know, you were saying, Anna, in that creative environment, people are able to be themselves and bring that creative juice because they're in that moment. So, you know, tech's a huge one, marketing and media. Also, I think wellness. People aren't going to say, oh, you know, oh, she's a lesbian, I don't want people to think I'm a lesbian, so I'm not going to follow her. You know, it's that whole internal dialogue is just like a dying Arcadian mentality. So I think now the popularity of others is much more mainstream, and I think we don't have to worry about, you know, the sexuality side of this. I mean, I'm talking about maybe in our London hemispheres, you know, our major capital cities, you know, but who's to say it can't stretch outside of that? We don't really need to ask permission anymore. You know, we don't need to ask permission. And you see that a lot more with younger people. They're able to be themselves. But in saying that, I think, you know, there's a really valid point in this is that, you know, when my son was in nursery, they didn't have any books with 2 men or 2 women in them. And we didn't get a lot of stick, but he started to kind of think that, you know, it wasn't normal. So we got loads of book on Todd Parr, from Todd Parr, really great guys talking about, you know, all different types of families. It doesn't have to be gay, it doesn't have to be straight, doesn't have to be this, doesn't have to be that. A family is anything. And when we took all the books to the nursery, they said, why do we need to have them here? And I said, because, why do you need to have that book over there with a mum and a dad in it? And they said, well, because that's part of their literature. And I'm like, but why is it a part of their literature? Why can't this book be a part of their literature? You know, and they said, oh, they learn about that in preschool. I'm like, no. Why do they have to learn about being gay or being different or being other than what you expect as, you know, that mainstream society to be? And they just sat there and they looked, they didn't really know how to answer it.
Did they do anything with it?
Well, they had to, because I left all the literature there and I told them they needed to use it, or else I'd kick off.
Excellent. That's the sort of woman we need.
Yeah. So I think, you know, now, you know, all the kids in my son's year, all the way from preschool now, you know, for them it's normalised. It's completely normalised. In my junior years, it was normalised. My mum had a lot of gay friends, you know, and for me, I just saw love was love. You know, yeah. And I don't think that it should be perceived as anything else. Your sexuality and how you choose to live your life is completely down to you. And it should be respected right across the industry. So I think, you know, why it matters is, you know, culture's power. You know, and if you're proud of your culture and your heritage and your history and who you are, it's powerful.
Yeah. Great stuff. Thank you so much for that. I'm aware that we've come very close, so I'm just going to offer literally a few seconds each. So be thinking about how you can do this in a punchy way. To just give you a chance to say, what legacy do you hope your visibility creates? Something that we can use perhaps as as something to encourage young women to be out, in fact, all the members of our community, the LGBTQI plus community, to be visible and to find their power in their visibility. What are you hoping that your visibility creates? Who's going first with a quick one-liner?
I might refer briefly then to what I find really interesting in our census data as a society, that with each generation, the percentages of people who identify as not entirely heterosexual or cisgendered only goes up. And those are facts, and they're very clear. So this is essentially a conversation that should not and cannot be ignored. The idea that we're not going to have to be a more inclusive, more visibly tolerant society is essentially pointless when you look at that data. You compare the identities of the over 75s to the 16 to 24, and it is a world away. So the truth is that lesbians and queer people should actually be appearing in every walk of life now. And I think what we just need to make sure that we're encouraging and using our visibility to do is to get those people amplified to leadership. Because at leadership level is where you then are making decisions, right? Or when you are really influencing what comes after you. So that data I find really interesting and really inspiring.
Thank you. I'm looking for shorter ones. What legacy do you think your visibility creates? Anyone else? We can use yours. Thank you, Anna, but can use it. But
I'd go with the classic.
Candice, if you want to get one in, I might invite you to go first because you might have to slip away, right?
Yeah. I just want people to feel whole.
Thank you.
I want people to feel whole and not less than.
Lovely. Brilliant. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us today. And Anna Mendes, do you have one for me? What do you want your visibility to create?
I guess, and it might be a bit different, but I'd like that us brave, visible lesbians are unremarkable, meaning that, it's just okay. It's just normal.
We're going to be ordinary. Your visibility is going to create the ordinary lesbian. How lovely is that? Kelly, what's yours going to do?
I'll go with the classic. If you can't see it, then be it.
Nice.
And if it makes it easier for one person that we've done this, then job done.
Yeah. I'm going to invite you to have another go. So when they do the cut and the Brent, you can come in with a short one if you want to. I want my visibility to create courage. I want my visibility to create bolder lesbians. Do you want a short one, Anna? Do you want to have a go?
Yeah, I would say I want my visibility to inspire those who are coming up next, not have to fight the same fight, but feel the benefits of some of what's gone before.
You're going to be like those curling women, aren't you? You're going to be like sweeping the path so that they can just glide along.
Yeah,
that's what we want to be. It's been a joy having you all here. Let's say thank you to Core Recruitment for putting this on for us as Lesbian Visibility Week. Thank you to all our panelists.